a cognitive trap. The goal of my experiment was to investigate if the focusing effect is prevalent in society and in genders of students from grade 9 to 12 in Singapore American School. The focusing effect is a cognitive trap that is defined as the tendency to compare two things based on one dimension rather than taking all the other dimensions into consideration. In other words, it is when individuals focus on one specific factor rather than considering the others. It is a fact that people make decisions on the basis of the known information they are available to in their working memory or experiences, and for this reason, other aspects of information are blocked. Individuals' decisions are only based on fractions of the total amount of knowledge that they have stored, causing them to make irrational decisions that could impact their future. To investigate the focusing effect, I conducted an experiment to research the prevalence of this bias in society, gender, and in age groups 13 to 15 and 16 to 18 by having the students of Singapore American School be the participants for my 30 trials. To test this bias, I created a scenario that I stated to each participant in the same way and asked them a question at the end, where they were asked to decide between two options. However, due to the scenario I created, there is another option. Normally, individuals tend to weigh factors unevenly, putting importance on some aspects than others. This is a reason why, if participants of my experiment choose the third option, then that would mean they are going against the focusing effect bias, as that would mean they are considering other aspects rather than the ones I gave them in the scenario. My prediction is that the focusing effect is prevalent in society, causing individuals at any age around the world make irrational decisions as that they would later have to pay the price for. According to Paolo Cherubini, PhD, when making a choice, people consider only the alternatives explicitly represented in their mental model of the decision, meaning there are other aspects they do not consider. However, they are required to when making a rational decision, allowing them to gain the highest payoffs or to benefit the most from their decision. Individuals focus on the alternatives explicitly stated in the problem context and do not take into account other possibilities. This statement, written by Paolo Cherubini and his colleagues, is what my experiment is based on, to test my hypothesis of the prevalence of the focusing effect in students of Singapore American School. People only take into account the options that are given to them, but they do not consider other angles of that situation or scenario, causing them to sometimes make decisions that might not be as beneficial as they hoped. Another paper that portrays this similar idea is titled, "Does Living in California Make People Happy?" written by David A. Seidel, PhD, and Daniel Hanahan, PhD. When a judgment about an entire object or category is made with attention focused on a subset of that category, this shows that the focusing effect does impact people when they make decisions. Due to the fact that I'm also testing if the focusing effect is more prominent in females or males, I think it would be more prevalent in men than women, as women tend to consider more options before making a decision or are more open-minded than men. I also predict that the younger age group, 13 to 15, in my experiment will conform to the focusing effect due to the fact that their prefrontal cortex is not as developed as the older group I am testing. Because of the focusing effect, people tend to focus on the small things that they are possibly given or they already know about, rather than looking at the other aspects and considering other factors that should be considered by any individual making a decision. For my experiment, I was stating the same scenario to each individual participating in the experiment, saying, "You work a job where you've been for almost 2 years. This job is quite far from where you live, meaning you are forced into commuting every day for about 2 hours every morning and night by bus. You are offered a new job, which is located closer to your place of residence. I will end with asking the participant, would you consider taking this new job offer or stay at your old? After, I will record the results of each individual's reaction to this question. My data will include if the participant came with a straight answer by saying yes to taking the new job or no and keep the old job. However, my data will also state if the individual chose to ask some clarifying questions about this scenario which they required to make their final decision. Example, their decision will depend on the pay. Each individual participating in my experiment will be alone when they are making their decision. There will not be anyone there to cloud their judgment, proving that this would be their decision, not someone else's. I will also document their age group they fall into, 13 to 15 or 16 to 18, and their gender, as those are the variables I'm testing when looking at the focusing effect and how prominent it is in the two variables. From my experiment, I observed that out of 30 trials I conducted, 14 students of Singapore American School would definitely take the new job that was offered to them, while 16 students asked and followed up with questions regarding this new job, proving that those 16 individuals needed more information to make their decision. This shows that out of the 30 individuals participating in my experiment, 14 compared the two options by only using the information provided to them, or also known as the focusing effect. The difference between the two options were two individuals, as 46.7% chose to definitely take the new job, and 53.3% needed more information when making their decision. In my experiment, I investigated the prevalence of the focusing effect in society, but also in gender and age groups. When looking at the results from my experiment, the age groups I used to measure the prevalence of the focusing effect were ages 13 to 15 and 16 to 18. Out of the 16 individuals who needed more information when making their decisions, 10 of them were from the ages 16 to 18, and the other 6 were from 13 to 15. Among the 14 participants who chose to definitely, no question, take the new job, 5 individuals were from the 16 to 18 age group, and 9 were from the 13 to 15. These results show that the younger age group in my experiment were the ones more affected by the focusing effect. When looking if the focusing effect was prevalent in a certain gender, I documented the gender of each individual when I conducted my experiment. My results show that out of 53.3% of the individuals that needed to ask questions before making their decision, 7 were female and 9 were male. Out of the 46.7% who chose to definitely take the new job with just the information I provided them with, 8 were female and 6 were male. When looking at the data collected from this experiment, out of 30 individuals involved, not one chose to definitely keep the same job. The experiment I conducted to test the prevalence of the focusing effect in students of Singapore American School and whether the focusing effect is more prominent in men or women, but also considering age as a factor, only consisted of 30 trials, meaning the results of this experiment when investigating if the focusing effect is dominant in the 3 variables will not be as precise and accurate as it is required to be when making a conclusion. The sample size of the experiment I administered of 30 trials is a small population to make a conclusion that is definite and accurate. If this experiment, when testing the prominence of the focusing effect in the 3 variables, was conducted with a larger population of individuals of Singapore American School, then the results would have a higher accuracy. The focusing effect is majorly connected to the experiment I conducted with the students of Singapore American School, as the same scenario I gave to each individual in person allowed me to see if the students taking part in my investigation was conforming to the focusing effect or if they were not, due to their reactions and their decisions they made when asked the question. At the end of the experiment, that was the evidence that showed me whether or not the focusing effect was prominent in the individual's decision-making skills. If the individual taking part in my experiment gave me a straight answer, saying yes to definitely taking the new job or no to taking the new job offer and staying at the old one, then that would tell me that the focusing effect is used by those individuals, causing them to make irrational decisions. However, after the question was asked to a student, and their first reaction is to ask about the scenario, like what is the pay for the new job, then that would mean they are not agreeing with the focusing effect, as they are trying to find out more about other aspects of the scenario, or looking at all the dimensions. Looking at the results of the experiment I conducted shows that the focusing effect is prevalent, but there's a higher percentage of individuals that do not conform to the focusing effect when making decisions. Possibly, the percentage of individuals using the focusing effect when making decisions could be higher than the ones not, causing these individuals to make decisions that are not the most rational, and in the long run, they could pay a price for their decisions. Though the results of my experiment do not match my predictions and do not reflect what was already stated in the field, I think I can still add the results I gained from this experiment investigated to the field. The results show out of 30 individuals in Singapore American School, 16 did not conform to the focusing effect. This might not be as accurate, but this shows that out of the 30 individuals, 16 did in fact consider other aspects when making their decision. As I conducted this experiment looking at 3 different variables, I can still add the results to the field even if the sample size was not as big, due to the fact that this type of experiment, considering the 3 variables, was never done when looking at the focusing effect, and with the students of Singapore American School. In Singapore American School, men were less likely to conform to the focusing effect, and more individuals in the 16 to 18 age group were less likely to conform as well. These results can be added to the field as this experiment was conducted for the first time and the test was fair as their variables were controlled. There were external factors that could have impacted the results of this experiment, like the scenario I stated to investigate the relevance of the focusing effect, could not have been significant enough to be individuals involved in the 30 trials. This scenario might not have been suited to the students, causing them to not take it as seriously as they should have. If this was the case, then the results might be different if they did take it seriously, or if the scenario was relevant enough for them too. Another factor that could have deferred the results would be if the age group that I used to experiment the focusing effect was wider apart. The factor could have majorly deferred the results and conclusion that would have been drawn up, and would also have been different when taking into account the age variable. From the results of my experiment, I can conclude that out of 30 individuals in Singapore American School, there is a higher percentage of individuals that do not conform to the focusing effect. This shows that these students are more open-minded, meaning when making a decision, they consider other aspects, looking at everything that could impact their decision rather than only comparing a few factors that they are given or that they already know about. This allows individuals to make decisions that are rational, but also gives them the highest payoffs and the most benefit in the long run. Done.